Welcome back to the ultimate backstage pass where music meets sheer chaos. And today, we are diving straight into the high-stakes world of K-pop's most unpredictable innovators. We all know Stray Kids has been tearing up global charts, but as they geared up for their massive 2026 world tour, behind the scenes tension reached an absolute boiling point. You see, tour production is usually a finely tuned machine run by veteran directors and strict corporate budgets, but for this tour, the 8 members decided to take complete control of their destiny. They made 8 mind-blowing decisions that left their own staff, stylists, and security teams completely speechless, scrambling to rewrite the rules of live entertainment. We're talking about choices that defied safety protocols, completely altered stage designs, and pushed their physical limits like never before. What could possibly make a seasoned tour director put their head in their hands in absolute disbelief? Which member decided to scrap a $1 million production set just days before the opening night? And how did a single creative choice change the way fans will experience live concerts forever? Get ready, because we are about to pull back the curtain on the shockwaves that shook the JYP headquarters to its very core. Number 8. EN. The raw silence, stripping the tech. It was a chilly Tuesday evening in Seoul when the creative team for Stray Kids' highly anticipated 2026 World Tour gathered in the primary conference room of the JYP Entertainment headquarters. The mood was already tense as they were only 3 months away from the opening night, and the production design budget had already ballooned into the millions. The meeting was supposed to be a routine presentation of the individual member solo stages, and the staff was excited to showcase the concept for the youngest member, IN. The visual team had spent nearly 2 months designing a state-of-the-art stage layout for him, a massive, hovering platform suspended by industrial cables that would float over the audience, surrounded by a laser grid of cyberpunk neon pink and green that responded dynamically to his vocals, backed by a heavily layered vocal processing track that ensured absolute studio-like perfection even while he was high in the air. It was a masterpiece of modern tour production, designed to minimize any vocal strain while maximizing the visual spectacle. But just as the project manager finished showing the breathtaking 3D renders, IN sat forward, looked the entire senior production staff in the eye, and quietly said that he wanted to scrap the entire design. The room fell into a stunned silence. IN explained that he did not want the floating platform, the lasers, or the vocal backing track. Instead, he wanted a single wooden stool, 1 spotlight, and to sing completely acoustic with just a live guitar player. And most shockingly of all, he insisted on performing without in-ear monitors. For the staff, this was not just a bold request. It was a terrifying logistical and technical nightmare. To understand why the audio directors gasped in horror, you have to understand the brutal reality of stadium acoustics. In a venue holding 50,000 screaming fans, the sound from the main speakers travels hundreds of feet, hits the back walls, and bounces back to the stage with a massive delay of up to 2 seconds. In-ear monitors are the only thing keeping a performer in time and in tune. Without them, the auditory feedback is a chaotic, deafening echo chamber. Singing live under those conditions is like trying to write a letter while someone screams different words in your ear. The chief audio engineer immediately stood up, arguing that it was physically impossible to maintain pitch and timing, and that even the most seasoned rock legends wouldn't dare to attempt a stadium solo completely raw. The production manager warned him that if he went out of tune, the internet would tear the performance apart within seconds, potentially damaging the group's reputation. But IN was resolute, his eyes reflecting a quiet determination that the staff had rarely seen from the usually playful Magne. His decision was rooted in a deep, emotional journey that goes back to his trainee days. For years, as the youngest member, he had carried an invisible burden, constantly worrying about whether his live vocals measured up to the intense performance standards of Stray Kids. He remembered the painful criticisms from the group's early survival show days, the sleepless nights spent practicing in cramped vocal rooms until his throat was raw, and the lingering insecurity of being labeled just the cute youngest member rather than a serious vocalist. This 2026 tour was his moment to strip away all the digital safety nets, the heavy studio production, and the elaborate stage gimmicks to stand before the fans in his purest form. He wanted to show the world that his voice alone could command a stadium. Hearing the skepticism of the staff, leader Bang Chan spoke up in a meeting, supporting IDN's decision and telling the crew that if Hyunjin believed he could do it, then the team should find a way to make it happen. The guitar player who was assigned to accompany him was also terrified, knowing that any slip in tempo would ruin the entire performance. The debate lasted for hours, with staff members bringing in safety experts and vocal coaches to persuade him to at least wear a single earbud, but IDN remained firm, stating that he wanted to feel the raw vibration of the crowd and hear the true resonance of the venue without any digital barrier. The staff eventually relented, but the atmosphere in the rehearsals became incredibly strained. The crew spent weeks running simulated delay loops in the JYP practice rooms, trying to train IN's brain to ignore the acoustic lag of the speakers. In the initial rehearsals, it was a disaster. The delay would throw him off, causing him to lose his tempo, and the sound directors would exchange anxious, terrified glances. During the first live sound check at the actual open-air stadium, the wind was blowing hard, swirling the sound around and making the acoustic environment even more unpredictable, raising the stakes to an absolute maximum. The pressure on IDN was suffocating, and he spent extra hours alone on the empty stage after everyone else had left, singing into the void, learning to rely entirely on his internal metronome and the muscle memory of his vocal cords. The sound engineers had to completely redesign the stage monitor speaker layout, positioning hidden ground monitors that were calibrated to deliver a highly localized, zero-latency feed of the acoustic guitar, a technical adjustment that took days of trial and error. When the opening night finally arrived and the stadium lights dimmed, the massive LED screens went completely black, plunging the venue into an unfamiliar, quiet dark. As IDN walked out carrying nothing but a microphone, the staff backstage held their breath, some literally closing their eyes in fear of a vocal disaster. What followed was a performance that bypassed all the rules of modern K-pop, capturing a raw, heartbreaking vulnerability that left the entire venue and the weeping staff members in absolute awe of his sheer vocal growth, proving once and for all that he was no longer just the young boy they needed to protect, but a mature, powerhouse artist who could command the wind and the silence of a stadium with nothing but the strength of his voice. Number 7. Seungmin. The Shattered Ballad, Unleashing the Metal. It was a bright Thursday morning at the JYP Practice Center in Seoul, but the atmosphere inside the main production design room was anything but bright. The creative directors were reviewing the physical stage setups that had already been manufactured, specifically the highly anticipated solo stage for Seungmin. The team had designed a visual masterpiece that was meant to be the emotional peak of the concert, a stunning white grand piano mounted on a rotating platform, surrounded by thousands of custom-engineered LED white roses that would gradually bloom and change color to match the emotional crest of his trademark ballad. Seungmin, known for his pristine, sweet, and crystal-clear vocals, was supposed to sit at this piano, bathed in soft, angelic blue light, providing a serene, breathing moment for the audience amidst the high-octane choreography of the rest of the show. The set had cost JYP tens of thousands of dollars to construct and was already packed in shipping crates, ready to be sent to the stadium. But when Seungmin walked into the room for the final review, he didn't even look at the beautiful blueprints. Instead, he placed a heavy, black leather case on the table, unzipped it to reveal a sleek electric guitar, and told the directors that he was scrapping the ballad entirely in favor of a raw, aggressive, high-energy rock metal track that he would play and sing completely live. The staff members looked at each other, convinced that he was playing a prank. The lead visual designer, who had spent sleepless nights programming the LED rose colors, sat in stunned disbelief. The tour director immediately explained that his ballad was a vital pacing element in the 3-hour setlist, designed to let the fans rest their voices and give the production crew time to reset the stage machinery. Replacing it with a loud, pyrotechnic heavy rock performance would disrupt the flow of the entire show. Moreover, Seungmin had never performed live electric guitar while singing heavy rock on a global tour. The vocal coaches were instantly alarmed, warning him that the rasp and grit required for a metal track could severely damage his vocal cords early in the tour, potentially forcing them to cancel later dates. But Seungmin was unyielding. This decision was born from a deep, long-brewing desire to shatter the cozy, comfortable box he felt he had been placed in. For years, he had been praised as the steady, reliable vocalist who sang beautiful soundtracks and emotional ballads, the dandy boy of the group. While he appreciated the love, he felt a burning creative frustration, believing that his true range and raw, rock-infused power were being ignored. He wanted to show the world that his voice had teeth, that he could scream and command a stage with the same chaotic energy as the rest of Stray Kids. Seeing his determination, his bandmates backed him up, with the producers of the group helping him fine-tune the aggressive guitar tones in the studio. The staff scrambled to contain the crisis. The music directors had to pull all-nighters to rearrange the live band setup, replacing the soft string arrangements with heavy drums and distorted bass lines. The visual team had to dismantle the expensive piano set, selling off the custom LED roses at a loss, and rapidly construct a gothic, industrial playground filled with real fire nozzles, rusted chain fences, and blinding red strobe lights. Rehearsals became a virtual battlefield. Seungmin practiced his guitar riffs until the skin on his fingertips split open, forcing him to apply liquid bandage just to keep playing through the pain. The vocal trainers watched him like hawks, constantly checking his vocal folds with medical equipment to ensure he wasn't causing permanent damage with his new, aggressive singing style. The production crew was on edge, terrified that the sudden shift in energy would alienate fans who expected a soft, emotional vocal stage. On the first night of the tour, the transition from the group's dance set to Seungmin's solo began not with soft piano keys, but with a deafening screech of guitar feedback. When the stage was illuminated by sudden, violent bursts of fire, revealing Seungmin clad in black leather, tearing into a heavy guitar riff while unleashing a powerful, gravelly roar into the microphone, the absolute heat from the pyrotechnics blasted through the venue, melting away the staff's initial worries. The backstage staff stood in paralyzed shock, staring at the monitors as the stadium erupted in a way they had never anticipated. Seungmin had not only pulled it off, but he had also completely transformed the concert's dynamic, proving that his artistic evolution was far more dangerous and exciting than any of them had ever dared to imagine. Number 6. Felix. The Invisible Dance, Painting in the Dark. It was a busy afternoon at the JYP production warehouse in Incheon, where the physical stage testing for the 2026 Stray Kids tour was underway. The fashion department and the visual effects team were buzzing with excitement, eager to present their collaborative work for Felix's solo stage. They had spent months coordinating with a top European luxury house to create a custom, crystal-encrusted tactical harness and jacket that sparkled brilliantly under the stadium lights, costing a small fortune. Alongside the costume, the tech team had developed an advanced, real-time motion tracking camera system that would project a giant, golden CGI avatar of Felix on the massive LED screens behind him, mimicking his complex, fast-paced choreography. It was set to be a visual spectacle designed to highlight Felix's status as a global style icon. However, when Felix arrived for his costume fitting and visual demo, he looked at the sparkling jacket and the towering screens, thanked the team for their hard work, and then dropped a bombshell decision that left the room in absolute chaos. He announced that he was rejecting the luxury costume and the CGI screens entirely. Instead, he wanted to perform in complete, absolute darkness, wearing only simple black pants, with his entire upper body covered in complex, glowing bioluminescent paint that would only be visible under ultraviolet black lights. The safety director's jaw dropped, and he immediately stepped in to object. In the production world, performing intricate choreography on a raised stage in pitch darkness is considered a massive hazard. The stage featured multiple hydraulic lifts and open gaps. A single misstep in the dark could result in a fall from a height of 10 feet, leading to severe injury. The broadcast director was also in a panic, explaining that standard stadium cameras couldn't capture high-definition footage in near-zero light conditions, meaning the giant screens would show nothing but static, leaving fans in the upper decks completely blind to his performance. But Felix was deeply committed to his vision. This decision was rooted in his personal struggle with his identity as an artist. For years, He had been praised for his striking, ethereal visuals, his freckles, and his changing hair colors. While grateful, Felix felt an underlying frustration that his physical appearance sometimes overshadowed his raw dancing ability and the unique, deep baritone voice that had become Stray Kids' signature sound. He wanted to strip away the distractions of high-fashion outfits and flashy computer graphics. He wanted the fans to experience his performance not as a commercial pop show, but as a raw, primitive piece of physical art where only his movements and the deep vibration of his voice existed in the dark. The staff had to scramble to find a compromise, but Felix insisted on the purity of the darkness. To prevent a catastrophic accident, the crew had to apply textured, glow-in-the-dark tape along the edges of the stage that was invisible to the audience, but tactile enough for Felix to feel through his shoes. Rehearsals were nerve-wracking. Felix practiced for hours blindfolded, memorizing the exact number of steps required for every turn and jump, relying entirely on his internal spatial orientation. There was a terrifying moment during a late-night run-through when he miscalculated a spin and stopped just inches from the edge of the stage, causing several staff members to scream in terror. The technical crew had to source experimental ultra-low-light cameras, usually used for wildlife documentaries, just to capture his silhouette for the broadcast screens, while the lighting designers had to program a complex sequence of UV blacklights that would flash in sync with his heartbeat. When the tour finally kicked off and Felix's solo segment arrived, the entire stadium went completely dark, silencing the crowd of 50,000. As the deep, sub-bass frequency of his voice began to shake the stadium floor, a sudden pulse of UV light revealed a glowing, ethereal silhouette of bioluminescent patterns moving fluidly through the dark, creating a haunting, beautiful display of human movement that felt almost supernatural. The backstage crew, who had spent weeks worrying about safety lawsuits and ruined footage, stood glued to the monitors, completely mesmerized by the sheer artistic power of a member who had dared to disappear into the dark to show his true light. Number 5.
Han.
Breaking the barrier, confronting the crowd. It was a tense morning briefing in the security operations office of JYP Entertainment, where the security chiefs, local tour promoters, and safety coordinators for the 2026 Stray Kids World Tour were reviewing crowd management protocols. The discussion turned to Han's solo stage, which the production team had originally scheduled to take place on the highly secure main stage, elevated 15 feet in the air and shielded by a double row of heavy metal barricades, a line of 20 trained security guards, and a beautiful array of augmented reality graphics that would project protective visual shields around him. This setup was designed not only for aesthetic purposes, but also to provide a psychological comfort zone for Han, who has been open about his struggles with severe social anxiety and the overwhelming pressure of performing in front of massive, chaotic crowds. However, when the security team presented the safety perimeter plans, Han quietly but firmly shook his head and delivered a decision that sent the security chief's blood pressure through the roof. He demanded to scrap the main stage performance entirely. Instead, he wanted a tiny, 2-meter-wide platform placed in the dead center of the standing room floor, completely surrounded by thousands of fans, with absolutely no barricades, no physical fences, and no visible security guards separating him from the crowd. The security director stood up in disbelief, immediately declaring the plan a logistical suicide. In the high-stakes world of stadium concerts, placing a global superstar within arm's reach of 50,000 emotional fans is an absolute nightmare. A sudden surge in the crowd could cause a dangerous crush, or an overzealous fan could easily jump onto the platform, putting Han's physical safety at extreme risk. The local promoters warned that municipal safety codes might not even approve the venue permits if JYP bypassed standard barrier protocols, prompting heated arguments in the conference room. But Han remained immovable, his expression serious and reflective. His decision was deeply tied to the emotional core of the solo song he had written for the tour, a raw, diary-like track that detailed his personal battle with anxiety, the feeling of suffocating under the public eye, and the painful moments of isolation he felt even when surrounded by people. He explained to the staff that singing a song about vulnerability and overcoming fear while hiding behind massive iron gates and a wall of security guards felt hypocritical and empty. He wanted to face his fears head-on, stepping down from the pedestal of the main stage to stand on the same level as the fans, trusting them completely to protect him. It was a massive psychological leap of faith. The debate raged for days, with JYP executives voicing concerns about liability, but Han's bandmates stood by him, with Chan and Hyunjin offering constant reassurance, arguing that the relationship between Stray Kids and their fans was built on mutual trust. Eventually, a highly unconventional compromise was reached. There would be no physical barriers, but a team of elite, undercover security personnel dressed in casual fan attire would be strategically placed in the crowd directly surrounding the platform, ready to intervene only in a worst-case scenario. Rehearsals were emotionally exhausting for Han. The crew ran simulated crowd surges, with staff members shouting and pressing close to the platform to test if Han could handle the intense sensory overload without losing his composure or his voice. There were moments when the anxiety became too much, and they had to pause rehearsals so Han could catch his breath in the quiet corridors backstage, supported by his members who sat with him in silence. The crew watched with bated breath, praying that he wouldn't freeze up under the real stadium pressure. When opening night arrived, the lights transitioned to a warm, soft amber, and Han walked down the steps of the main stage, walking directly through a narrow pathway in the crowd to the center platform. The atmosphere in the stadium shifted instantly. Instead of rushing him, the fans, realizing the vulnerability of the moment, voluntarily stepped back, holding up their light sticks like a protective wall of stars, displaying incredible emotional restraint out of pure respect. As Han stood on the small platform, looking directly into the eyes of the people surrounding him, his voice trembled slightly before locking into a powerful, emotional rap that resonated through every corner of the venue. Backstage, the security chief and the production directors stood watching the feeds, tears welling in their eyes as they witnessed a moment of pure, raw connection that defied every safety manual in the industry, leading the security chief to later admit that in his 20-year career, he had never seen such a peaceful and respectful crowd, proving that sometimes the strongest shield an artist can have is the unspoken bond of respect and love with their audience. Number 4. Changbin. The Oxygen Gamble, rapping without a breath. It was a humid afternoon at the JYP rehearsal studios, and the vocal directors were closely monitoring the audio feeds for the group's title track performances. The choreography for the 2026 tour was the most physically exhausting one yet, featuring fast formations, high-energy jumps, and constant movement. To protect the member stamina and ensure the audio quality remained high throughout the massive 3-hour show, the audio engineering team had developed a highly sophisticated backing track system. For Changbin's legendary, high-speed rap verses, they had created a split vocal double track mixed subtly at -6 decibels to blend seamlessly with his live microphone. This track was programmed to quietly play his pre-recorded voice on the last word of every line and during complex transition steps, giving Changbin tiny, half-second windows to inhale and recover his oxygen levels without the audience noticing any silence. It was a standard industry practice, essential for preventing performers from running out of breath or straining their vocal cords during intense movement. But during a dry run, Changbin's sharp ears immediately detected the backing track. He halted the rehearsals, walked directly to the main mixing console, and requested that the engineers delete every single vocal double track, leaving his microphone completely raw and unsupported. The vocal directors and the tour manager were instantly thrown into a state of panic, trying to convince him that his request was a physical impossibility. Rapping at a speed of over 9 syllables per second while simultaneously performing heavy choreography requires an immense amount of oxygen. Without the backing track to catch his breath, he ran a severe risk of hyperventilating on stage, passing out from oxygen deprivation, or developing vocal nodules from the extreme strain of shouting over the loud band. The staff argued that even a small mistake would be broadcast to 50,000 people and recorded by thousands of phones, exposing JYP to harsh criticism. But Changbin refused to compromise, his pride as a hip-hop artist and a producer of Stray Kids taking absolute precedence, with Han and Chan nodding in silent agreement and respect for his artistic choices. He explained that the raw energy of live hip-hop is lost when it is polished and sanitized by studio magic, and that the audience deserved to hear the true, unfiltered human effort behind the music. He wanted the gasps of air, the natural shifts in tone, and the sheer physical struggle to be part of the performance, showing the world that Stray Kids' reputation as live performance powerhouses was built on genuine, hard-earned skill. Seeing his unwavering stance, the trainers had no choice but to adjust, but it meant Changbin had to push his body to its absolute limits. He began a brutal training regimen, running on a high-inclination treadmill at top speed while reciting his fastest verses, learning how to partition his lung capacity to the millisecond. During rehearsals, the tension in the room was palpable, and the medical team was always on standby with oxygen tanks, checking his blood pressure and oxygen saturation levels after every run. There were days when Changbin would finish a run-through and collapse onto his knees, gasping for air, his chest heaving violently while the medical staff rushed to check him, sending the performance coordinators into a panic. The sound engineers had to work tirelessly to recalibrate the compression settings on his microphone, ensuring that his sharp, rapid-fire delivery remained clear even when he was breathing heavily. When the tour finally opened and the beat dropped for their main title track, the stadium erupted in screams. As Changbin stepped forward for his verse, the backing tracks fell silent, leaving only the thunderous bass and the raw, booming power of his voice. He delivered the entire complex, double-time rap with a fierce intensity that shook the venue, his timing perfect and his energy explosive, creating a heavy, punchy sound that separated them from any typical pop concert. Backstage, the vocal directors stood frozen, watching the oxygen level monitors and clutching their headsets, only to let out a collective shout of triumph when he completed the verse and flashed a confident grin at the camera. He had proved that raw determination and physical mastery could conquer any technical safety net, leaving his own staff in absolute awe of his boundaries-shattering professionalism as his bandmates rushed to hug him.
Number 3. Lee No. The slippery slope, defying gravity on water. It was a tense Monday afternoon at the JYP production offices when the safety coordinators and staging engineers for the 2026 Stray Kids World Tour gathered to discuss the technical specifications for Lee No's solo dance performance. As the main dancer of the group, Lee No's performance was expected to be a masterclass in physical movement, and the creative directors had designed a highly elaborate, cyberpunk-themed street set. To create a dramatic, atmospheric effect, the visual team planned to use advanced, dry laser light projections and heavy clouds of dry ice to simulate a heavy rainstorm, ensuring that the stage floor remained completely dry, clean, and safe for his fast-paced footwork. This dry setup was essential for safety. Lee No's choreography was notoriously difficult, filled with sharp pivots, sudden stops, leaps, and floor work that required absolute traction. But when Lee No reviewed the safety briefs and the laser test footage, he flatly rejected the simulation, stating that fake rain looked cheap and lacked the raw, emotional weight he wanted to convey. He demanded that the production team install a real, high-pressure overhead water sprinkler system that would dump hundreds of gallons of water directly onto the stage during the climax of his dance, creating a genuine, torrential downpour. The safety director was immediately horrified, and the staging team erupted in protest. Dancing on a wet, slick surface is one of the most dangerous things a performer can do. The stage materials become slicker than ice, making it virtually impossible to maintain grip. A single misstep during a high-speed spin or a leap could result in a torn ACL, a broken ankle, or a severe concussion, which would instantly derail the entire multi-million-dollar global tour. Furthermore, the chief electrical engineer raised extreme concerns about safety, pointing out that having massive amounts of water pouring onto a stage filled with high-voltage lighting, floor monitors, and hydraulic lift wiring created a severe risk of short circuits, equipment failure, or even electrocution. But Lee No, known for his fierce professional pride and uncompromising dedication to dance, was completely unyielding. He explained that the concept of his dance was about struggle, survival, and pushing through emotional storms, and that he needed the physical resistance, the weight of wet clothes, and the unpredictability of real water to make the story authentic. He wanted the audience to feel the danger, the grit, and the raw beauty of human movement fighting against the elements. Faced with his stubbornness, the crew had to scramble to design a custom waterproof stage floor, laying down specialized, high-grip rubberized panels and drilling hundreds of tiny drainage holes to prevent pooling. Rehearsals in the flooded testing facility were brutal. Lee No fell repeatedly, bruising his elbows, knees, and hips as he tried to find his footing on the slippery surface. The stylist team worked tirelessly, testing over 20 different pairs of athletic and dance boots, finally modifying a pair of tactical boots with custom rubber soles imported from a specialized climbing company to maximize friction. The safety team constantly begged him to wear protective pads under his clothes or to simplify the choreography, but he refused, spending hours analyzing the friction of different shoe soles and adjusting his center of gravity to slide with the water rather than fight it. His fellow dance line members, Hyunjin and Felix, watched his wet rehearsals in silent, anxious worry, amazed by his resilience. He practiced his jumps with obsessive precision, training his muscles to land perfectly vertical to avoid slipping. When opening night arrived, the tension backstage was suffocating, with emergency medical technicians standing on high alert at the stage wings. As the overhead nozzles activated and a curtain of real water rained down under a single spotlight, the crowd gasped in surprise as the front rows felt the physical splash of the water. What followed was a breathtaking display of physical mastery. Lee No sliced through the water, sending brilliant sprays of droplets into the air with every sharp movement, his balance flawless as he executed the high-speed choreography without a single slip. Backstage, the safety crew stood glued to the video monitors, their hearts in their throats, only to erupt in deafening cheers and sighs of relief when he struck his final pose, drenched but victorious. The tour director immediately ran out to the wings with dry towels, shaking his head in absolute disbelief. Lee No had pushed past the limits of safety to deliver an unforgettable, cinematic masterpiece, leaving the staff in absolute awe of his iron will and unmatched physical genius.
Number 2. Hyunjin. The living canvas, painting the motion. It was a busy morning at the JYP Creative Center, where the visual styling team and the contemporary performance directors were finalizing the artistic assets for Hyunjin's solo segment of the 2026 World Tour. Given Hyunjin's reputation as a highly expressive, dramatic dancer and a global fashion ambassador, the styling department had collaborated with an elite French luxury brand to design a heavily embroidered, structured avant-garde suit that would shimmer dramatically under the lights, a project that took months of negotiations and design drafts. To match this premium look, the performance director had choreographed a complex, theatrical contemporary piece, hiring a troupe of 10 professional backup dancers to create a grand, sweeping group dynamic on stage, backed by pre-recorded digital art projections that simulated paint strokes on the massive LED screens. It was a safe, highly polished, and visually stunning concept that aligned perfectly with high-budget pop standards. But when Hyunjin arrived for the presentation, he took one look at the structured suit and the digital mock-ups, sighed softly, and delivered a decision that left the entire creative department in a state of absolute disbelief. He politely requested to dismiss all 10 backup dancers and scrap the expensive designer suit entirely. Instead, he wanted to stand on the stage completely alone, wearing nothing but a simple, oversized white linen outfit that he would hand paint himself before the show. Most shockingly, he demanded that a massive, 20-foot-tall blank canvas be erected in the middle of the stage and announced that he would paint on it live, using his own hands, brushes, and body to throw wet acrylic paint onto the canvas in real-time sync with his choreography. The art director's face went pale, and the stage manager immediately voiced strong objections. In the world of live stadium production, using actual wet liquid paint on stage is considered a massive logistical nightmare and a severe safety hazard. The stage floor for the 2026 tour was made of delicate, expensive high-definition LED panels. If wet acrylic paint dripped onto the floor, it could seep into the electronics, permanently damaging the screens and costing JYP hundreds of thousands of dollars. Furthermore, wet paint on the stage surface would create slick spots, making it incredibly easy for Hyunjin to slip and fall during his intense, acrobatic contemporary floor choreography. The camera director was also deeply worried, arguing that live painting could easily look messy, uncoordinated, and chaotic on the broadcast screens, potentially ruining the visual aesthetic of the show. But Hyunjin was deeply passionate about his vision, and leader Bang Chan helped him pitch the idea to JYP executives, arguing for his artistic freedom. For years, painting had been his personal sanctuary, a quiet space where he could escape the suffocating pressures of global fame and express the complex emotions he couldn't put into words. He wanted to fuse his two greatest loves, visual art and physical dance, into a single, living, breathing performance where his body acted as a paintbrush and his raw emotions were physically splattered onto the stage. He wanted each night of the tour to produce a completely unique, unrepeatable piece of art. To make this possible, JYP had to consult a specialized chemical lab to develop a custom-blended, non-toxic paint that was thick enough to stick to the canvas without dripping, yet quick-drying and non-slip to ensure his safety under the hot stage lights. The stage hands had to manually secure the massive canvas with heavy counterweights beneath the stage floor to prevent the wind from tipping it over in outdoor stadiums. Rehearsals in a plastic-wrapped studio were chaotic and exhausting. Hyunjin had to practice spinning, jumping, and sliding while holding paint-drenched sponges and brushes, learning the exact physics of how to throw the paint so it hit the canvas with artistic force rather than splattering the expensive camera lenses. He suffered numerous bruises as he adjusted to the slippery spots, practicing late into the night until his hands were stained blue and black. When opening night arrived, the stadium fell into a stunned silence as the lights revealed Hyunjin standing alone in front of the giant white canvas. As the haunting, emotional music began, his body moved with a fluid, desperate beauty, his white clothes slowly catching splatters of paint as he dipped his hands and brushes into the paint wells, flinging the colors onto the canvas in perfect sync with the heavy beats. By the time the song reached its dramatic climax, he had created a breathtaking, abstract masterpiece, standing before the raw, chaotic painting he had just birthed in front of 50,000 crying fans. Backstage, the director stood in absolute silence, realizing that Hyunjin had created a historical, museum-worthy piece of performance art, with JYP later planning to exhibit the paintings for a charity gallery, turning his shocking decision into a historic victory. Number 1.
Bang Chan.
The control room coup, mixing the chaos. It was a late night at the stadium during the final production rehearsals for the 2026 Stray Kids World Tour, and the air was thick with exhaustion and anxiety. The creative team was running the technical setup for the leader, Bang Chan's solo stage, which was designed to be a massive visual tribute to his role as the group's main producer. The set designers had built a futuristic, high-tech spaceship command deck on the main stage, complete with a custom-engineered DJ console that was pre-programmed to sync with the stadium's laser grid and pyrotechnics. Under this safe setup, Bang Chan would stand behind the prop console, mimicking DJ actions while the actual show directors, sound engineers, and lighting operators ran the complex systems safely from the front of house control booth in the center of the stadium floor. It was a standard, time-tested method that guaranteed a flawless show without placing any operational burden on the performer. But when Bang Chan walked up to the prop console during the run-through, he stopped, looked at the production director, and delivered a decision that sent the entire technical crew into an absolute panic. He announced that he was rejecting the spaceship set and would not be performing on the main stage at all. Instead, he demanded to perform his solo track directly inside the actual front of house control booth in the middle of the stadium crowd, standing alongside the real crew. Even more shockingly, he insisted on taking full, active control of the live digital mixing console and the primary lighting board during the performance, mixing his own microphone levels, controlling the live band's instrument balance, and triggering the stadium's main lighting cues in real time while singing his solo. The chief audio engineer and the lead lighting designer were completely horrified, immediately arguing that his request was an unacceptable operational hazard. The control booth is the absolute nervous system of a stadium show, managing hundreds of delicate digital channels, instrument feeds, and wireless frequencies. A single wrong button press, an accidental fader slide, or a misplaced finger on the board could cause a deafening feedback loop that could damage the audience's hearing, mute the sound entirely, or plunge the entire stadium into pitch darkness. They argued that it was impossible for a performer, who is already distracted by singing and executing an emotional performance, to manage the complex, high-pressure duties of a lead sound engineer. But Bang Chan was resolute. As the leader and primary producer of Stray Kids, who had spent 10 years crafting their musical identity in dark recording studios, he wanted to demystify the music-making process and pay tribute to the invisible, tireless work of the production crew. He wanted to show the fans that the mixing board was his true instrument, turning the technical heart of the venue into a live stage to bridge the gap between creation and performance. The debate lasted for days, with JYP technicians refusing to hand over control of the expensive DGI-Co mixing console, but Bang Chan's deep technical knowledge of audio engineering eventually forced them to yield. The engineering team had to spend nights setting up a highly complex, invisible safety override system, allowing the chief engineer to secretly take back control if Bang Chan made a critical error that threatened the broadcast or safety. Rehearsals were incredibly stressful, with Bang Chan spending hours learning the exact channel mapping of the massive console and practicing how to hit lighting triggers on specific musical beats while keeping his live vocals steady. The lighting designer watched in amazement as Bang Chan memorized the grandma console layout, showing a level of dedication that rivaled their professional crew. When opening night arrived, the stadium lights faded, and instead of a spotlight on the main stage, a single, brilliant beam of light illuminated the FOH control booth in the center of the crowd. Bang Chan stood there, headphones around his neck, his fingers flying across the glowing faders and digital screens of the massive soundboard, adjusting the live band's EQ while singing a raw, powerful track. As his fingers hit the cue buttons, waves of lasers and strobe lights erupted across the stadium in perfect synchronization with his voice, proving to the stunned audience that he was controlling the entire stadium with his fingertips. Backstage, the technicians and directors stood glued to their monitors, holding their breath through every transition, only to let out a massive, emotional cheer when he finished the song without triggering a single safety override. Bang Chan had defied all the rules of live performance, transforming a technical workspace into a monument of raw, self-produced artistry, leaving his own staff in absolute awe of his leadership and technical genius. When looking at these 8 shocking decisions, a clear and inspiring pattern emerges that defines the true identity of Stray Kids in 2026. This tour was not just a series of concerts. It was a peaceful rebellion against the highly structured, sanitized, and manufactured nature of modern pop entertainment. The rejection of the safety net, from IN's refusal of in-ear monitors to Changbin's elimination of vocal backtracks, the members consistently chose vulnerability and potential failure over artificial perfection. The demolition of the pedestal, Han's barrier-free platform, and Bang Chan's migration to the control booth shattered the traditional distance between superstar and audience, turning the stadium into a shared, democratic space of trust. The fusion of art forms, Lenos' battle with Slickwater, Hyunjin's live-action painting, Seungmin's metallic transformation, and Felix's bioluminescent darkness proved that choreography is not just physical exercise, but a medium for high-art storytelling. Ultimately, these choices forced JYP's veteran staff to throw away their standard playbooks and engineer entirely new ways to manage safety, audio, and visual presentation. By forcing their crew to adapt to their raw artistic demands, Stray Kids proved that they are no longer just performers executing a company vision. They are the directors of their own destiny, setting a historic new benchmark for authenticity in global music.